Great news! We finally have a sponsor!
That is great news. Our channel is still pretty small, so I wasn't expecting that. Who's the sponsor?
We are!
What?
Yeah, we are, with our novel, Reign of Shadows.
You're joking, right?
Nope, this video is sponsored by Reign of Shadows.
Reign of Shadows is a novel based in our fantasy world called Alutopec. And it's about two children who escape being forcibly enlisted by the king and accidentally awaken a necromancer.
It's almost 400 pages of adventure, mystery, and suspense. It has dragons, magic, and a history that begs to be investigated.
Check out the link below. You will not be disappointed.
So, what's the video going to be on then?
I see you didn't think that far ahead.
Hey, I got our first sponsor. That should count for something.
It definitely would if it wasn't us.
Meh, I'm still counting it.
Well, I've already shared the first chapter of Reign of Shadows. You can click the card right here. I think that's where it is. So today I was thinking I could share the story of the Legend of the Four Kings.
The Four Kings? I've never heard of Four Kings. Is that what happens next with all this going around?
What? No, not Four Kings. The Four Kings. You know, the first rulers of Alutopec?
The Four Kings?
Yes.
The Four Jewels of Alutopec? Those Four Kings?
The very same.
You know that story has death, betrayal, and evil, right?
Yeah, I wrote it.
And you thought it would be appropriate for YouTube?
It's a story that I wrote based in a fictional world. So yeah, I figured it would be.
Nope, no way. Too dark, too scary. We need to play it safe.
Play it safe?
Absolutely. Better safe than sorry. We don't want to upset our sponsor.
We're the sponsors!
Good point. But still, play it safe.
Fine. Then I'm going to share the story of Bongo the Boring today.
He sounds promising. Very interesting.
Alright, let's do it.
Yes, let's hear it.
Hey lore lovers, today I have an interesting story about Bongo the Boring. Now, don't let the name fool you. Bongo was quite the man. Big, burly, and such a charmer too. And all day he would sit in a rocking chair and knit, and knit, and knit. And when it came time to eat, he would just nibble on whatever was closest to him as he continued to knit. And what was he knitting, you may ask? Well, he was actually knitting boots for his cat, of course. He would spend all day knitting these little booties for his cat, even falling asleep in the chair. When he would finish the boots, he would toss them to the floor and start a new pair. During all this time, not once did he ever own a cat. He just sat in his chair, knitting away forever. Knitting, and knitting, and knitting. Just making boots for a cat he never had. Forever knitting, and knitting, and knitting.
That's it.
Yep.
That was...
Boring.
Well, it wasn't exciting. Why was he making boots for cats when he had no cats? I have so many questions, and none of it has to do with our book.
Who would have guessed with a name like Bongo the Boring it wasn't filled with adventure?
Yeah, maybe you should tell the story about the Four Kings.
You mean the Four Kings?
That's the one!
I thought you'd see it my way. Now that I can finally share this story, I'll be more than happy to. And I promise you, lore lovers, it is so much better than the story about Bongo the Boring. So, before going any further, I would love to share a little bit of background first. This legend takes place in the fantasy world of Alutopec. And the legend of the Four Kings is actually mentioned a few times in the novel Reign of Shadows.
Link is in the description down below. Now, back to the story.
Now, this started a long time ago, back when ancient times were still in the distant future. There was a tribe of man called the Bone Hunters that came from the Rantiak Islands. And this story begins with the prince of the Bone Hunters of the Rantiak Islands. So, who was this prince? He was a nobody. You see, in Bone Hunter culture, they revered death. With life so short and fleeting, and the afterlife spanning eternity, they thought this life was pointless. So why have a name in such a pointless life? Only those who did great deeds or became a hero actually had a name. And this particular prince hadn't done anything worthy of a name. To add to this, the Bone Hunter culture always wore a mask of a skull. Only the ones at the bottom of society weren't allowed to wear a mask and let life ravage their face and their body. This was shameful and degrading and embarrassing. You did not want to be seen without your skull mask. Yet the prince reveled in it. He loved showing off his good looks. The prince's father, King Tang Korak, had conquered the Rantiak Islands and had a well-deserved name within the Bone Hunter culture. Meanwhile, the prince would womanize and commune with the lowlives of society, being caught more than once without his mask on. Instead of upholding law and order, he would assist in thieving and helping criminals get away. It was all just a game to him. Too many times did King Tang Korak save his son from trouble. Too many times did he bail his son out of jams. The king finally decided that enough was enough. The prince was not learning. He didn't care. And so he banished his son from the Rantiak Islands, telling him to only return once he's conquered all of Alutopec. Only then would he be allowed to return and possibly have a name for himself as well. Cast from the land he knew, without a name or any knowledge of the land he was going to, he prayed for assistance. Whether it be allowing death to take him during the ship ride there, or fulfilling his father's road to redemption. He landed in Syro, a small village on the edge of the Akatung jungle, founded by bone hunters. Now during this time, Alutopec was in chaos. There had been no one ruler over Alutopec since the kingdom of Rose sank beneath the waves. Warlords came and went. If you could keep a tower of 3 stones stacked on top of each other for more than a year, you were considered lucky. You were successful and established in this chaotic world. Now, if there was anything bone hunters were good at, it was violence. They were known to be the best warriors and the best hunters known to man. From a young age, they were trained to kill, to assist others in leaving this world. Everybody feared the bone hunters. Fresh off the boat, the prince was making camp in this new world, in a small village, when one night a band of raiders attacked Syro. He defended himself well, taking out several of the attackers before being ambushed from behind and being knocked out. The prince awoke, his hands and feet bound, and smoke filled the air. He watched as the camps and small hovels of Syro burned to the ground. Being tied up, he heard horrible, horrendous screams of torture and watched bodies writhe in pain from the fires and the attackers. He noticed it was just him who was bound. Luck, it seemed, was on his side. A woman stamped up to him, smacking him across the face. She screamed at him, how dare he cut down so many of her men. It had taken years to build up the company she had, and the prince alone had taken out at least a third of her men. With a knife to his throat, she asked the prince if he would join them. He could teach her men to fight like he did, or he could die like the rest of the people of the village. The prince wasn't a fool, and he readily agreed to help. She introduced herself as Crystal, leader of the Akatung Raiders. She and her men would plunder anything east of the Echo River, and even down into the Lomora swamps. She was fearless and laughed at any challenge. To some, she may seem deranged, but to the prince, she was perfect. Ruthless, and in a sixth sense of the way, she was just. When Crystal asked for his name, the prince admitted he doesn't have one. Crystal wasn't surprised since he was also not wearing a mask. So Crystal named him Emerald because of his vibrant green eyes. They were so green and filled with life, it was as if staring into the essence of life itself. Crystal was true to her word, and Emerald had become one of the team. He taught everyone how to fight like a bone hunter, how to hunt like a bone hunter. He had befriended a man named Safsil, and he could hold his own before Emerald even trained him, much like Crystal could. A fourth raised through the ranks. He was slower at learning how to fight, but seemed well versed in thinking and strategy. More than once, battles were won because of his tactics. This man was named Rubino, and although he wasn't bloodthirsty like Emerald, his eyes glowed with the crimson malice that so few ever had. Reputation spread of the Akatung Raiders and the Four Jewels as they became known as. Safsil with his ocean blue eyes, and Crystal with her milky gray. They were all so bright and so filled with violence, hatred, and anger. It was like the scourge of the gods were in human form among these four. Separate, they were deadly, but together they were nearly unstoppable. Soon the riches of the jungle weren't enough. The Four Jewels craved more and more. They wanted more fame, more notoriety, more treasure, more men to command, and more land to own. Emerald convinced the others to move forward. Instead of raiding each village, attacking and then running away, conquering them instead. Together, all four of them could conquer all of Elutepec and split the spoils of war among them. And best of all, they would be kings of all of Elutepec and have riches beyond imagination. The thoughts ensnared each one of them, and the Four Jewels of the Akatung Raiders now became the Four Kings of Elutepec. They swept through the swamp and into the wild lands. Even now the dragons had been destroyed, nearly extinct. And so the Dragonborn didn't really stand a chance against the Four Kings and their might. It was in these mountains that the Dragonborn guarded that Emerald found the Iospa diamond. Holding the diamond, he could command anyone's loyalty for an entire moon cycle. At the time of the next full moon, he would have to command them again, or they would regain their free will. Emerald kept this treasure for himself and hid it away. They pushed through the Bomoku Mountains and up north into the Biodle Desert. Each region fell, one by one. The Nylar Peninsula, the Gateway Mountains, the Timlin Forest, and lastly, the Omrang Field. While in the prehistoric city of Datnu, it being one of two cities that had stood for the entirety of time, did Emerald hear of another legendary treasure. Hidden deep within the Timlin Forest and forgotten by almost everyone. Combining this treasure with the Iospa diamond, he could rule everyone and everything. The ancient leather the story was written on, he burned, so nobody else could find it. And anyone who knew of this legend or this treasure, he killed. By now, the Four Kings had claimed all of Elutepec for themselves. They were the most powerful people, and everybody feared them. While dividing the land, Emerald was the most gracious. He only wanted the Timlin Forest. He didn't want any other region, and the other kings eagerly agreed to this. Safsil took the Omrang Field and the Gateway Mountains. Crystal took the Nylar Peninsula, Bomoku Mountains, and the Biodle Desert. and Rubino took the Akatung jungle and the Lamora swamp. Years passed, and there was finally peace within Elutepec. Rumors spread of random citizens wandering into the Timlin forest, and when they returned, becoming more violent than ever before. Through belligerent cursing or in their dying quivers, they continuously swore allegiance to the one true king of Elutepec, King Emerald. Safsil, who had taken residence within Detnu, now feared for his life. The great city was littered with gargoyles. All shapes, all sizes, all monstrous. Legend spoke of these stone guardians awaking up from their slumber and defending the one true king. And on one night, the gargoyles awoken and tried killing Safsil. He managed to flee to a city he named after himself and never returned to Detnu. Meanwhile, and though it isn't known if it was through love or through the power of the diamond, but Emerald and Crystal married, and Emerald took ownership of Crystal's land. To honor this matrimony, Emerald built the city of Crystal within the Nylar Peninsula for her. And with both armies, they marched on Safsil, where their old friend eagerly agreed in spare of his own life, as long as Rubino surrendered first. King Emerald and Queen Crystal thought this was fair and agreed. And so the three allied together and went after Rubino. And these wars were tough as Rubino continuously outsmarted them, taking many victories in his swamp kingdom. During his reign, Rubino also started to learn magic, and he had many witches and wizards within his army. But Emerald had numbers, and so the battles never ended. It was like watching the tides move, taking land only to be pulled back soon after. Rubino's teacher, one of the greatest wizards of their time, named Izamar, convinced Rubino to go to Opal Lake for a pilgrimage to gain more power. This power that he sought after was eternal life, which Izamar told him was on Queen's Island in the middle of Opal Lake. With such a prize, Rubino disregarded the risks and went straight for it. Emerald, being told that Rubino was on the run by one of his most faithful warriors, went after him. Emerald's army surrounded the lake as the four kings finally met on Queen's Island. Before Emerald could strike down Rubino, Izamar intervened. With the spell, he turned the four kings into stone, the only light coming from their eyes, which had turned to gems. Sapphires, crystals, emeralds, and rubies now rested in their place. Only once the gems were placed back into these statues would the four kings awaken from their imprisonment. Until then, they remained frozen, watching the world, unable to move. Through time and purposeful misdirection, the gems were lost. Even the statues of the four kings themselves have been lost to time.
Okay, you win. That was so much better of a story than Bongo the Boring.
I thought so too. Well, lore lovers, what do you think? Was this an interesting story? Does this legend make you want to read our novel, Reign of Shadows? If you've already read the book, what do you think of the four kings? Let me know in the comments down below.
And if you've read Reign of Shadows, what's your favorite part? What would you like to hear next from this world? Let us know in the comments down below.
And be sure to like and subscribe, and hit that bell notification icon to be alerted for when the next video becomes available. Especially if you want more Reign of Shadows content. And until next time, lore lovers.